What is up, everybody? This is Adam. Welcome back to Fouled Out. Matt is going to be joining me in just a moment to talk about week 4 of the NFL season. What used to be the quarter pole until they added another game to the slate, but kind of still the quarter pole. It's hard to believe we've already played 4 weeks of football. Before we get started, I want to introduce you guys to a very special guest on today's podcast. My nearly 3-month-old daughter, Luna, is going to be joining me for at least a portion of the podcast because she refuses to go to bed at a reasonable hour here in Michigan. But don't worry. She watches a ton of football with her dad and probably has better opinions than most people that I see on social media. So she's ready to go. I'm ready to go. We're going to go grab Matt and talk week 4. But a reminder before we get started, you can reach out to us, fouledoutsports@gmail.com. Really appreciate you guys listening, and we'd love to hear from you. Been having some good conversations 4 weeks into the season with fans of the pod, so keep those coming. Let us know how you feel about how your team season's going. Make picks for next week. Give us your gambling picks as we give you ours every week. With that said, we got Luna. Let's go grab Matt, and let's talk week 4 of the NFL. Let's go. We are back. Luna's here. Matt is here. Matt, how you doing, buddy?
Apparently not as great as Luna.
She is very happy to be here. Probably like we've had quite a few guests on this show over the years. She's probably the most excited to be here because her options were go to bed or sit here with dad while we record. And she was like, I am not going to sleep. I refuse to sleep. I got flaming hot takes I want to spit out, and I'm ready to go. So we talked about it a little bit in the intro, but if you guys hear baby noises for a little bit here, that's what's going on. Don't worry. Luna does watch a lot of football, though. Like that's her main activity on Sundays is like sit in the love sack in my living room with me and watch football. She just stares at the screen. She loves it.
Being trained well.
Yeah, she's pissed on Sunday. I tried to put her to bed during the Ravens-Bills game, and she's like, I got to know how my Ravens are doing. And I was like, oh, man, she's a big Derrick Henry girl. Big Derrick Henry girl.
Can't blame her.
Yeah. So we're coming off 4 weeks of football now. And I kind of feel like we're at the point where the NFL is just messing with us. Like, I feel like they hired M. Night Shyamalan to write their script this year. And it's just like, hey, look, it's the Buffalo Bills. They've looked like the best team through 3 weeks. Oops, 25-point loss to the Ravens on Sunday Night Football. The dumpster fire Bears, oh yeah, they get to beat Matt Stafford. And here comes Joe Flacco in relief of the injured Anthony Richardson to beat the Steelers, who look like they had the best defense in the league through 3 weeks. And you get cut up by Joey Flax. And I just feel like all things are now 50-50, whether it's going to happen or not. And that the lines that Vegas sets is just to bait us into losing our money.
Yep.
Like,
well, that's always what it was. But
yeah, it's true. Well, like you can win. I just won a bunch of money today because the Detroit Tigers swept the Astros in their wild card series. Let's go Tigers. That was plus 160 for the Tigers to win that series. So it seemed winnable, but like in the NFL, you have Denver go into New York and beat the Jets while only passing for 60 yards. Like basically something that hasn't been accomplished since the forward pass was invented. And then the Bucs, who lost to Denver, got killed by Denver last week, come back and absolutely smack Philly. I'm a little shell-shocked right now. Like I had a bad weekend fantasy-wise. I had a bad weekend, like really bad weekend gambling. I don't know, man. I'm at the point where I'm wondering like how much we can take away from any one like individual week in the NFL.
no, you can't ever look at any one week in the NFL and like try to derive the truth from that. It just do not believe anything before like week 10 because
But
Like you need like more than a couple of months to figure teams out eventually.
I know. I feel like it's very prisoner of the momenty to come on here after week 4, after what we just saw the Ravens do, and be like, oh, they're the best team in the NFL now. Because like that's the headline, right? It's like Buffalo looked like the best team through 3 weeks. The Ravens absolutely schmeckledorf them on Sunday Night Football. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, the Ravens are actually the best team. And Lamar Jackson is the MVP again, not Josh Allen. And we have a long way to go, but it's hard to not overreact every week because we do only see one football game a week, right? Like we see every team plays one game a week, and you want to come on here and be like, this
Yeah.
is what I know, but we know nothing.
We
We know
we
nothing.
really don't know Jack.
So that said, I have a couple teams I'm really trying hard not to overreact to at this point in the season. And the first one is the Ravens. So like the Ravens started 0-2,
Hmm.
and we kind of came on here and we were like, what are the Ravens doing? They're not running the ball, they're throwing too many passes. And it seems like the last 2 weeks they've really gotten back to committing to the run game with Derrick Henry running for 271 yards versus Buffalo after 274 last week against Dallas. Derrick Henry is back leading the league in rushing yards after 4 games, and it's led to the Ravens being number 1 in offensive DVOA. And so, like, I don't want to overreact and do what I just said and come on here and be like, the Ravens are the best team in the NFL. But like looking at them offensively, I'm like, damn, if they're really going to commit to Derrick Henry like this, and that Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson option play and backfield is as scary as we all thought it would be if they had done this like 2 years ago, there's a good chance they really could be the best team in the NFL going forward.
Yeah, yeah, no, that I think that is absolutely fair. I mean, like the potential is there. Well, yes, I think we would all probably agree that the defense is not as strong as it was the year before. We all kind of knew that coming into this year, having lost Mike McDonald, right? That potential with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson in the run game together, combined with, Zay Flowers continuing to ascend and really prove himself in the NFL. The offense, I think, is much more capable this year of sustainably putting up points. And honestly, I think the only real difference between, you know, Sunday night and the previous 3 games for the Ravens, because it's not like they've just gone out and laid eggs, like in terms of their execution every single week. It's that they finally kept their penalties in single digits. They only had 8 instead of the like 10 plus they were averaging.
It's funny, like when 8 is a massive improvement. You're like,
It
wow,
really
they
is.
only had 8. That's
Yeah,
amazing for them.
which is still not a good game,
No,
not a clean game, but like the fact that they were able to do that while still having 8 penalties really shows you where that ceiling is. And I mean, like every team has games where they just don't really play to their capabilities. And I think that this is a game where Baltimore showed up, really played to their potential, and Buffalo just did not. I mean, there are definitely a number of plays where like Josh did what he could, but his receivers just didn't make the play, right? And I still think most weeks he can probably count on them to do that, but they didn't on Sunday night, and I mean that makes a huge difference. So
yeah, I think one, the Ravens defense looked really fast.
Yep.
on Sunday. So like, although they've lost some pieces and they're definitely taking a step back this year, they the ceiling is still pretty high for that group. But also, I think there's two different Buffalo teams. There's the Buffalo team that gets up early and can like pound the ball with James Cook and Josh
Hmm.
Allen. And then there's the Buffalo team that gets down, like the Buffalo team that allows Derrick Henry to take the very first play of the game for the Ravens, 87 yards to the house,
Hmm.
and then you get stopped and like so they're down 14-0, like they're down double digits quickly. And then they have to start making plays in the passing game to come back. And it's
Yeah.
not like, oh yeah, we're gonna run and throw off play action now. It's like as great as Josh Allen is, he needs a wide receiver who can make a play for him
Hmm.
or help him make a play. Like Josh Allen can only do so much by himself, right? He had that one awesome play where he's falling out of bounds, chucks the ball downfield, and it's a 50-yard gain to Khalil Shakir.
Yep.
But you need somebody out there who can also make the game easy for Josh Allen
Yeah.
at some points. And like 3rd and 5, it's like, okay, who are we going to? And your top options are like Dalton Kincaid and Khalil Shakir. So it still remains to be seen. It's something we've talked about since the preseason of like, hey, they lost their like top of the line options, but can this receiving core be better as a whole with more depth and like not so much reliance on someone like Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis?
Yeah.
But I think Sunday was the first game where it showed up where it's like, oh, yeah, like it would be really nice to have a bona fide number one out there, especially
Hmm.
when Josh Allen is getting smacked in the face every single play by that Baltimore pass rush. So my
If you're Josh Allen, are you not like all the way up in Devontae Adams DMs right now?
I think there's a couple guys. I heard a rumor that Tyreek Hill might be traded with how the Dolphins season has suddenly taken a turn for the worse. It's like I'm all up in every wide receiver who could potentially be traded. I'm DMing them and being like, hey, so like Buffalo's not that bad. We got wings. It'll be. I was trying to think about like two good things to say about Buffalo, and I can't. I came up with wings, and it's not that bad.
Yeah.
If you can get buried in your house in snow overnight, you probably should move. That's like probably it. But going back to Baltimore's offense, so they're number one in DVOA right now through 4 weeks, which like still a pretty small sample size, but they've definitely looked the part the last couple weeks at least.
Hmm.
I somehow they still can't get Mark Andrews involved. Now it's been 2 straight weeks with one target and no catches for him. And he has basically been a glorified blocker out there with this run game. And I can't decide if it's really scary that he's not involved yet. And it's like, damn, they're this good and they haven't even gotten Mark Andrews involved. Or is this like a permanent change to the offense where he's kind of like an ancillary piece? And that's the big improvement is they're not relying on throwing to him as much. And they're like, hey, we're just going to feed all these other mouths first because they're more productive. Like Derrick Henry, Zay Flowers, Justice Hill's been amazing through
Hmm.
the first couple of games as like a change up, kind of change of pace back to what Derrick Henry brings.
Yeah.
So part of it's like, yeah, are they just going to feed everybody else because that's a better, more efficient offense and you want to hit them with like more speed and then the Derrick Henry battering ram? Or is it like, yeah, Mark Andrews had surgery after that hip drop tackle and he got in a car crash during training camp.
Hmm.
He's just going to recover in like 4 weeks from now. We're just going to be like, this offense is amazing and can beat you in so many ways.
Yeah, I think there's an element there of he's not all the way up to full speed yet. And there's an element too of like Isaiah Likely has really developed as a pass catcher, and they don't necessarily need to rush Mark Andrews to play in a role that they don't need him to quite yet. So like they're gonna put more on Likely's plate while he's getting right. Now, obviously, I would assume that they didn't see themselves starting 0-3. Uh, but I could see that kind of being the plan that they came into the season with for Mark Andrews, given everything that happened.
Yeah, those that could be a very plausible explanation, but whatever the issues with Mandrews are, I need the Ravens to figure it out quickly because I cannot deal with these goose eggs every week in fantasy.
Well, I think the Ravens' solution to that is Isaiah Likely. So,
It seems like it. I mean, Isaiah, not like Isaiah Likely's getting the ball that much outside of his awesome week one performance. I think their solution is like,
mhm.
why do we have to force feed this guy the ball when
Yeah.
we're number one in offensive DVOA right now? So,
Yeah, I think he got a decent amount of targets week two. It just week three they finally decided to start running the ball. So
yeah, that I think that's the thing though, is like, so is this a permanent solution that's really good for the Ravens offense, or do they work him in and that either makes them better or worse down the road? But I do think right now, if they stick to this formula they found, they could easily get back to being 13-4 again. Because like, yeah, the defense isn't as good this year, but you know what really helps your defense? When you run for 274 yards and they get to take a break for like every 10 to 15 minutes of gameplay.
yeah,
So the second team I'm trying not to overreact to right now is the Washington should be fighting Georges. Trademark pending. I mean, seriously, guys, now you're getting good at football, it seems, and you're still going with the Commanders when you could have the Fighting Georges trademark for the low cost of $5 million. It seems like mismanagement not to pay me the $5 million at this point.
honestly,
But
there's hemorrhaging money.
I'm sure they're making a ton because of the NFL TV rights deals. But think about how much you could be making if you weren't named the Commanders and you were named something awesome like the Fighting Georges. Just
If you didn't have literally the lamest team name in the entire NFL.
just think about it, Josh Harris. Think about it. But the Washington should be Fighting Georges beat Arizona 42-14 on Sunday. They are now 3-1 this season and in first place in the NFC East through 4 weeks. You had Philly winning the NFC East and Dallas missing the playoffs. I had Dallas winning the NFC East and Philly missing the playoffs. Obviously, what's going to happen here is that Washington is now going to win the NFC East, and both Philly and Dallas are going to miss the playoffs.
Yes.
That seems like the most logical solution after what we've seen through 4 weeks. But yeah, Washington number 2 in offensive DVOA, only behind the aforementioned Ravens. They've scored 38 and 42 points the last 2 weeks, and they've only punted one time. In 2 weeks of football, they've punted once.
Yeah.
Jayden Daniels, rookie QB, leading the league in completion percentage right now. You want to guess what percent of his passes he's completing this season?
I'm gonna go with 78.
You are too low. 82.1% of his passes.
Jesus.
Through 4 games, he has 19 incompletions. Number 2 in completion percentage right now is Geno Smith, who's completing 72.3. So he's just about 10% higher than the next highest right now. He's been extremely accurate, and it seems like his rapport is building with his guys.
Mm-hmm.
But more importantly for Washington is right now, it seems like Jayden is like the dude. You know, from his play to
Mm-hmm.
his swagger to the way his team is rallying behind him, like he has that it factor. And so far, he seems like a big time QB for them. And it's like, it's been pretty instant because we've only played 4 games and he's been incredible so far.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that assuming Cliff didn't just shoot himself and his team in the foot all season long, like he was starting to do in Arizona, his offense was a pretty good fit for Jayden. and that Terry McLaurin was a very good fit for him. Um, I didn't think that he was going to start this hot, but I mean, I don't think either you or I questioned what his potential was. It's just how quickly he has gotten to this point. Uh, so
No, we laid out the case for this in the picks pod where we picked Caleb Williams to be rookie of the year, offensive rookie of the
mhm.
year, and it was like plus 135, but Jayden Daniels was plus 500. And we were just like, yeah, there is that like chance that he comes in and has that RG3 type season with his passing and
Mhm.
rushing ability. And that kind of looks like what's happening so far because he's what QB 3 or 4 in fantasy now
Yeah.
because he's rushed for a couple touchdowns. He runs the ball. He has been excellent passing, and now he's starting to throw touchdowns too. He doesn't turn the ball over at all. So yeah, it's like he he might be the next great rookie QB. And it's awesome for Washington fans because if you think about like franchises who have never had that guy, like who has Washington had? They had like 1 year of RG3.
I was gonna say they thought they had it.
That
They
well,
thought
they
they had it after that 1 year, and then just it
no,
blew up in
they
their
well,
face.
they did have it. That's the thing. And then Dan Snyder being a cheap asshole and refusing to fix the
Yeah.
field cost them that franchise QB, and he was
Yeah.
obviously never the same after the knee. They they had Kirk Cousins for a while, and like Kirk was pretty
Mhm.
good there, but like Kirk's never been the dude,
Yeah,
And
Kirk is like B plus,
I think about who else they
depending on the
had.
year. Yeah.
Just think about who else they had in our lifetime, and it's like Jason Campbell, Mark Brunell was there for a while. Like back in
Hmm.
the day, they had Joe Theismann, and I obviously they have won Super Bowls in the past, so they've had success. It's just like they've never had that franchise, like long term franchise guy that they're like, this
Yeah,
is like the dude. He's a top 5
right.
quarterback in the NFL.
Well, and even like back when they had guys like Theismann, it's like that was before the truly like quarterback dominant years of the NFL. There are people who I would say wrongly uh make an argument that the Dolphins had hands down the best quarterback, of like within like, 10-15 year range of his career in Dan Marino, and they never won one Super Bowl with him. So like it really wasn't until like the late 2000s, 2010s when like it truly became, yeah, you need the quarterback in order to do it.
Yeah. One thing I will say about Dan Marino is he threw for 5,000 yards in a season back when people did not throw for 3,000 yards.
Yeah, it
And
was it was unheard of to do it
he threw
back then.
5,084 yards and 48 touchdowns back in 1984,
Yeah.
which is an absolutely insane stat if you look at like that nowadays would be the MVP. And we would be talking about how
But
awesome
yeah,
that guy is. Back then, that was absolute lunacy to even suggest that someone could do that. So I think that's why Dan Marino's held in such high regards. Is like,
for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
another season, 2 years later, he did 470, like 4,746 and 44 touchdowns, but threw 23 interceptions,
Yeah,
which
there's not a valid argument to say that Dan Marino isn't one of the best quarterbacks of all time, but there are people who go a little bit too crazy with him. So,
you mean, yeah, mostly Dolphins fans, but
yeah.
they was,
Just like hardcore stat bros too. So,
yeah, it's also kind of crazy to me that it was just totally acceptable to throw 25 interceptions. Back then, it was just like, yeah, he threw for 5,000 yards, 48 touchdowns, and only 30 interceptions. Like, wait a minute. You threw 30 interceptions? You want to talk about the Jameis Winston stat line? That's like the ultimate Winston. This is like good Winston.
Yeah.
The all-time record for interceptions in a season is George Blanda, who threw 42 interceptions in 1962. George Blanda played football before the forward pass was allowed in the NFL. Like you look back at his game log and it's like he played in 12 games where he threw one pass. So I don't know. It's like they start passing the ball in the 50s and 60s, and it's like this drug that's introduced to the community that people don't know what to do with. Because like homie's out here completing 47% of his
Yeah.
passes, throwing 42 interceptions, and he's an all-pro quarterback.
Well, it's like AI right now, where everyone's like, let's use it for everything. It's like actually it's only good at like three very select things right now.
They're like, we're all 34-year-old white men. You should just be throwing slants, not like slinging this ball all over the yard, George Blanda. But yeah, man, George Blanda had a fucking career. Like, and if you look at a lot of those stats,
He burned right.
that's one way to put it. That's one way to put it. But like, you look at a lot of these stats from like this 50s and 60s AFL, and it's like none of the things we care about in 2024 mattered back then. All that mattered back then was like fucking eating a hot dog and smoking a stogie and then going out there and playing football. Like people died on the field. They did not care about concussions. They did not
No.
care about interceptions. Didn't matter. But talk about most unbreakable records in all of sports. Like nobody will ever beat George Blanda's 42 interceptions. It just
No.
won't be. No one will ever allow that ever again. I don't even know if people would allow like, we saw Jameis throw 30 a couple of years ago, and I don't think we're ever going to see somebody throw 30 again.
I genuinely believe that Doug Peterson is a bad enough coach that he would allow it. The question is, would he survive long enough to allow it?
The craziest thing about George Blanda's 42 interception season is that his team was 11-3.
Yeah.
And they made the AFL championship where I think they lost in the AFL championship that year. But these things just didn't matter back then. And it makes me wonder, does it really matter now? Like, does it really matter? What would happen if someone threw 42 interceptions and went 11-3? Would it matter?
Jamius, show us for science.
Oh God. Matt and I have been sitting here going down a rabbit hole while we're looking up these stats. Fuck George Blanda, 1962. Back then there was no playoffs. It was like the two best teams go to the championship. So he played one playoff game against DTX, which I'm guessing is Dallas. Yeah, so it's Houston versus Dallas for the AFL championship. George Blanda goes 23 of 46, 261 yards, one touchdown, 5 picks in a 20-17 loss in the championship game. Probably wonder what would have happened if maybe he throws one less interception. Do they win the AFL championship? This is what this podcast should really be about, is we should just revisit 1962 AFL football.
I honestly, if you had asked me if I would be down for that or we were today, I couldn't have given you an answer, and now there's nothing I want to do more.
New from Fouled Out Sports, a beautiful disaster. That's the name of the podcast, A Beautiful Disaster. It's about 1960s AFL football. Good Lord. So anyway,
1962, a beautiful disaster.
A beautiful disaster, an AFL story. going back to the whole thing that started this conversation was Jayden Daniels is awesome and doesn't throw a lot of interceptions.
Thank you
And
for reminding me because I totally forgot where we started.
this almost turned into a beautiful disaster of a podcast, but so Washington fans super excited right now. They have every right to be. I'm a little bit bummed though, to be honest, because like obviously I want Drake May to be awesome. And the chances of there being multiple awesome quarterbacks in a draft is like the chances of there being one awesome quarterback in a draft is already not good. I went back
Yeah.
and looked at how many drafts had more than one quote unquote awesome guy. So 2020, you have Burrow and Herbert and Jordan Love. And then Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Hurts were also in that draft, who like are starters in the NFL. Jalen Hurts obviously not having a great start to this season, but like did go to a Super Bowl. But I mean, Burrow and Herbert, both awesome.
Mhm.
2018, which is aging like a fine wine that was like shitty for 6 years and then all of a sudden became amazing wine. But that had Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. But the part that's aged well now is that also Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold were in that draft.
Yeah.
And so you could have four good quarterbacks in that draft now instead of just Allen and Lamar. Uh, so it's 2020, 2018, going back to 2012, which we talked about earlier. That draft had Andrew Luck, Robert Griffin III, Russell Wilson, and Kirk Cousins. And then before 2012, I had to go all the way back to 2004, which had Eli Manning, which I think is debatable if he was like an awesome quarterback or not. But it also had Phillip Rivers and Ben Roethlisberger. But the point being, I found four drafts in the last 20 years that had multiple guys who are starters in the NFL. And now I'm a little bit worried because I'm like, oh shit, like there is an awesome guy in this draft. And the chances of my guy also being awesome are now seems like a lot lower than it was before. And my guy hasn't even like seen the field yet. Especially because like I think Caleb's going to be good too. So it's like, okay, are we going to have three good guys in this draft? Bo Nix just won back-to-back games. Are we going to have four good guys in this draft? I don't know. I'm getting worried for no reason at all.
Yeah, why don't you let him play before you start getting worried?
I know, but like you tell me though, what's the chances that we're going to have like three awesome guys in one draft? It's not high, but it's not
Well,
impossible.
here's the thing. Caleb is in Chicago, so he might already be done.
This is true. Although I thought Caleb looked good this
He
weekend.
looked honestly, that there were some things that I could definitely nitpick him on, but um the defense just totally overwhelming. A incredibly undermanned Rams offensive line and Caleb are the only reason they won that game. Uh, DJ Moore looked awful. He had a horrible game, and that was because, in large part, because he was giving terrible effort.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing I liked about what I saw from Caleb was that he was like making quick decisions and making like smart throws and kind of taking what the defense was giving him instead of trying to play hero ball. And we talked about that in the draft before he got drafted as well. As like his biggest weakness is like, can you rein him in and have him play as part of your
He's
offense?
almost gone the like totally to the other side of the spectrum.
Yeah, it's like a little too conservative,
Hmm.
right? So I thought he like played a good game though. He did what he had to do to win.
Yeah,
Threw a touchdown. Like it, yeah,
it's
it's
just
getting it's
I
getting
don't
better.
know that you are really ever going to be successful consistently as a quarterback if you don't get protection from your interior offensive line. And Ryan Poles is adamant that he will not do that.
George Blanda made an AFL championship throwing 42 interceptions. And then he threw 5 more in the championship. So anything is that needs to be a fouled out shirt. It says anything is possible, and it has George Blanda like throwing an interception in the background.
47 was the limit.
That was we literally could not fit more into one season. And they only played 14 games.
Yeah.
Like imagine if he had 19 games like we do nowadays if you go to the championship or 20,
Oh my
whatever
God.
it is now.
He
20.
he would have broken 50 easy.
Yeah. He almost did it anyway. Uh but last thought on Washington is that I think, one of the popular narratives coming out of the first 4 weeks of the season is can they win the NFC East? Like I was saying earlier,
Mm-hmm.
I think their offense is the best unit that any team in the NFC East has right now.
Yeah.
But I think the record is like a little smoke and mirrorsy because while they're second in offensive DVOA, they're 30th in defensive DVOA. And that was kind of the issue coming into the season was like, yeah, you got a good defensive line, but there are some holes on
Yep.
that defense. And like, if the Giants had a kicker, you probably would be 2-2
Yeah.
with that week. So, but we'll see. I mean, the better Jayden Daniels gets, the less that it matters that you are not good on defense.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that they are a 75% winning percentage good NFL team. No. Uh, do I think that there is anyone in the NFC East that is showing that they are a real serious threat to that right now? To them winning the division right now? No. Like the Cowboys just straight up look bad. I mean, even beating the Giants, that was a pathetic game on their part. And quite frankly, if Daniel Jones could execute at all in the red zone, like they absolutely 100% lose that game. I mean, like the Eagles have literally just picked up where they left off from the end of last year. Like they are just a mess right now. Like,
You know,
is it possible that they could get some things sorted out? Sure, but like that's a tall order. And Daniel Jones just is not going to win this division at this point. He's just not.
no.
He had his one magic season where he was kind of sort of almost okay, and that is the best he's gonna do.
The funny thing about Philly right now is they're 2-2, which
Hmm.
it's not the best start to the season, but it's not like they're not like 0-4 or
No.
something. And everybody's talking about Nick Sirianni getting fired. They're like, oh, if he messes up one more time, he's gonna get fired. And I'm like, God, if that's your coach, where you're 2-2, and everybody's like, oh man, he's like one mistake away from getting just fire him now.
I
We
think there's a lot of people who wanted him gone this past off season.
which is like crazy work because he went to a Super Bowl like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And then last year they were like, what, 8-1 at one point.
Yeah.
And so to go from, hey, we went to a Super Bowl, now we're 8-1 and we look like we could get back to being not even a full year later. And we're like, this bum needs to go. I mean, like this podcast has never been a fan of Nick
Yeah.
Sirianni, but just in general, the
Hmm.
owner, like everybody in Philly turning on you that fast is hilarious. But Eagles are favored to win the NFC East still. They're plus 110. Cowboys are plus 240. And the Commanders now tied with the Cowboys at plus 240. Same odds as the Cowboys to win the division. Commanders' next 5 games, home for the Browns this weekend, which the Browns are off to their worst offensive start by DVOA in franchise history.
Hmm.
Pretty bad. They're at the Ravens next week, which could be tough, but then it's Panthers, Bears, Giants. Like they could go 4-1 in that stretch, and then you're talking about being 7-2
Yeah. I
going
mean, every
into.
every one of those games is winnable.
We'll see about the
Like,
Ravens. At Ravens is going to be really
right.
tough.
Well, it's like which Ravens are you getting? Right?
Yeah.
So
But
are you getting the Ravens that showed up against the Raiders? That's winnable.
you know
If
what's
you
gonna
are you getting the Raiders that showed up against the Bills? That is not winnable.
mm, you know what's gonna happen though is that we're gonna talk a bunch about Washington and be like, man, Jayden Daniels has been awesome, and their schedule is so easy coming up, and they're gonna
They're
lose.
gonna turn into a total pumpkin.
No, they're gonna lose to Cleveland this weekend. Like this
Yeah.
weekend, they're gonna lose to Cleveland. We're gonna come back on here next week and just be like, yeah, that was fun while it lasted. That's fake. Sorry, Jayden Daniels. And then they'll beat the Ravens in Baltimore. And it's like, wow, we're back. We're so back, baby. The last team I'm trying not to
You
overreact to. You
totally redeemed yourself.
guys did it. The last team I'm trying not to overreact to is the Minnesota Vikings, who won 31-29 over Green Bay on Sunday to get to 4-0. It's only two 4-0 teams. It's the Chiefs and the Vikings, just like we all expected. The Vikings are number one in defensive DVOA. Going into this weekend, they got Sam Darnold revenge game against the Jets in London on Sunday. I like what I've seen out of the Vikings so far in Sam Darnold, but like there's part of me that's still waiting for him to turn into a pumpkin. And then also, I think about last year where as soon as people started jumping onto your bandwagon last year, you would lose.
Yeah.
Like I look at that Jets game this weekend and the Vikings are 2.5 point favorites over the Jets. And like after what we just saw from the Jets against Denver, that should be a smash spot where it's like, whoa, only 2.5 for the Vikings. Like
Yeah.
definitely taking that. But it's one, it's in London. And
Hmm.
two, I feel like this is the week where everybody's like, oh man, the Vikings are legit. Look at how good they are on defense. Brian Flores is in his bag. And then Aaron Rodgers comes and like rips their heart out just like he did for 15 years in Green Bay. And it's just like, oh, yeah, never,
Yeah.
never ever bet on the London game ever.
No, no, that is honestly like rule number one at this point.
Any game that goes
Um,
overseas is a stay away.
I will give it to Sam Darnold that he is playing the best football of his career, which granted that is a low bar, but it is a significant jump over that bar.
No, I mean, he's playing
Like
good. It's not just the best of
he's
his career, it's good football. He's playing good
he's
football.
overall playing pretty good football. However, I think he is kind of getting a little bit more credit than he should be because he's gotten lucky uh a number of times. In every game he's played so far this year, he's had like in each game 3 to 4 turnover worthy throws. And it was just this last game that someone actually finally caught one. So, um, and granted, like generally what happens when the defense doesn't catch those balls is you progress back to the mean and continue to put up better numbers. So like he's definitely benefited from that. The question is, can he cut those throws out before teams continue to actually catch those throws? Because if he does cut those out, then yeah, they're a really dangerous team because they're scheming up plays for Justin Jefferson like no other. And then by the time the defense is able to like really shift their weight in his direction, they've got it set up for Addison one on the other side, and Addison just kills them. So it just like they absolutely have the tools to do it, but Sam Darnold still needs to not give the other team's defense the chance to take the ball away because eventually teams are going to start catching those passes.
Yeah, I just keep going back to Josh Dobbs as well, where I'm
Yeah.
like, I watched 3 amazing weeks of Josh Dobbs last year. And then he came out and threw 4 interceptions, put up
Yeah.
like -2 fantasy points for the quarterback position, and instantly turned back into a pumpkin. And I just think no matter what Sam Darnold does all season, just because he's Sam Darnold, I'm just going to keep thinking about Josh Dobbs and being like, yeah, but it's next week. Like, is this the week in London? It gets really wonky. He throws 4 interceptions, and we're
Yeah.
like, yeah, that was
Yeah.
fun.
And then for this week too against the Jets, I mean, like with Brian Flores, there's really only two potential outcomes with the way Brian Flores is calling this defense. Either they straight up murder Aaron Rodgers, or Aaron Rodgers absolutely shreds them because, like, for all of my critiques of Aaron Rodgers, blitzing him is a big risk.
Yeah, good,
Big risk.
good against blitz. I'm excited the London games are back though, because football just starts too late in the day. Like 1 p.m. is too long for me to wait. And before I had kids, I would wake up on Sundays like hungover. The game would be at halftime. I would go and like check the stats, and I would go get coffee and like sit in bed and have coffee and watch the second half of the game while my wife slept until like noon or whatever. And then we'd go have sushi. Now that I have kids, by the time the 9:30 London game starts, I've already been up for 3 hours. I've drank a full pot of coffee. I've been to the park and back, and I've read 4 Dr. Seuss books. I'm like, God damn, I need football to start. I've been up for 3 hours already. This is insanity. So I'm happy to have it back though, because it's like I like having that morning game that gets you to the 1 p.m. window.
Yeah.
All right. America's favorite segment, Bolds and Scolds for week 4 of the NFL season. It is my week to go first with my bold. And I am going to bold Colts quarterback Joe Flacco. 16 of 26 this week, 168 yards, 2 touchdowns, in relief of Anthony Richardson, who got hurt early in the game, leading the Colts to a 27-24 win over the Pittsburgh Steelers. Very on brand for Joe Flacco. He came in last year for an injured Deshaun Watson, led the Browns to a 4-1 record, and threw 13 touchdowns in those 5 starts. And then they got rid of him so that there would be no QB controversy, because imagine if Joe Flacco was there right now after what he did last season and
Yeah.
what people would be calling for. Joe Flacco is exactly the type of quarterback that you need to have on your roster if your starter is Anthony Richardson.
Yeah.
Anthony Richardson gets hurt a lot because they run him a lot. So bringing in a dude who can just come in like ice cold off the bench, having not played this season, and come in and like play very well against the Steelers, who we thought was one of the NFL's best defenses, and just like win games, is an extremely valuable asset to have. And I feel like he's underrated as an asset. And I just was thinking about him today and thinking that he's, I think, very underrated for his career.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to look back at him and be like, he's one of the greats. Like, I'm not going to be telling my grandkids about Joe Flacco, but Joe Flacco is 17th all time in wins at the quarterback position. He's won 103 games. He's one of only 19 quarterbacks with over 100 regular season wins.
Yeah.
Matt Stafford will join that group with his next win. He's at 99 right now, so he'll be one of 20 soon. Joe Flacco has won more games than Warren Moon, Jim Kelly, Troy Aikman, or Steve Young in his career. He's 28th in passing touchdowns and 18th in passing yards in NFL history, and had one of the most insane playoff runs we've ever seen for a quarterback. 2012, 1,140 yards, 11 touchdowns, no interceptions, en route to winning a Super Bowl and being Super Bowl MVP, throwing 2 touchdowns against the 49ers.
Well, and I feel like it's valid for us to ask too, how many how many playoff runs were cut short simply because he ran into Tom Brady?
Yeah.
Like,
But I mean, he beat that playoff run. He
yeah,
beat Denver and New England
yeah.
in that playoff run and the San Francisco 49ers, which I don't know, man. It's such a whenever I think about Joe Flacco, that playoff run's the first thing I think of.
Yeah.
Did you know he only completed 58% of his passes during that playoff run though? It's like,
I didn't know it was quite that low. I knew it wasn't super high.
yeah, it's kind of crazy with all the other stats that he only completed 58%, but like he was just throwing bombs the
Yeah.
entire playoff. And you think
Hmm.
about that like Hail Mary in Denver that
Yeah.
won the game and like
Yeah. Well,
magical playoff run for that guy.
and I mean, like, he was honestly one of the guys to like start the strategy too of I'm just gonna bomb it deep and see if I can get a pass interference call.
Well, like think
See,
about the
he was notorious for drawing those.
yeah, the it's kind of genius. It's like if you throw the deep ball,
Yeah.
either you get a big completion, you get a pass interference call, you get an incompletion, or you throw an interception. And even if you throw the interception, it's basically like punting with how
Mhm.
far he's throwing the bomb. So like two of the four things that could happen are very, very good. And the other two are
Yeah.
not as big of a deal. So
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know, man. I was thinking about him after he came in and I was like, this guy's just so underrated and he'll be forgotten with history, except for a big, oh yeah, I remember that dude like had that super awesome playoff run that one time. That was cool. So I just wanted to give him a shout while it's time to give him a shout. Cause like when Anthony Richardson's healthy, he's gonna go right back to the bench and
Yeah.
probably but he'll probably come in like
He'll come in the next game, but
he'll come in at least two or three more times this season and win them a game or something, you know. So who's your bold for week 4?
King Henry is fucking back.
Mm,
I mean, that first touch he got housing that was it 87 yards?
yeah, it's like
Yeah.
86 or 87.
Yeah, it like that was prime Derrick Henry. Like we haven't seen that in years. And he's 30 years old now. Um, he's had a couple of injuries over the last couple of years. Nothing like huge, but um
Not since that, what was it called? The Jones fracture he had in his foot.
yeah,
That was
yeah,
that was pretty gnarly. But after that,
yeah,
like he's been good.
yeah. But you know, for a couple years now with his production somewhat declining, I think people were starting to ask the question of like, okay, like, is this the decline for Derrick Henry, right? Is this the end of King Henry? And I think with what we have seen over the last 2 weeks with him and how awful Tennessee's offensive line is still, the answer is no. Like Derrick Henry is still incredible. Maybe he's not quite at his peak, but I don't know that he's that far off of it. Um, and that the reality is that while he was the last couple of years in Tennessee, I mean, Derrick Henry is a running back that needs a little bit of an opportunity to get going. And that was not an offensive line that could block effectively enough to give him that.
Yeah, he on Sunday. So on Sunday he had 7 forced missed tackles and gained 119 rushing yards over expected, which is the third most ever since they started tracking that stat in 2018. So, like, yes, the stats were awesome, but also the advanced stuff suggesting that he's forcing missed tackles, he's breaking tackles, he's doing all of the things that prime Derrick Henry did. That's all there as well. And now it's, we talked about them recommitting to
Yeah.
the run. He had 24 attempts for 199 against the Bills, 25 attempts for 151 the week before.
Hmm.
So he's back. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but I think you're really going to appreciate my gambling picks for this weekend because it might be a Derrick Henry centric segment. My scold for week 4, Kansas City Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes, who will not end up on this segment very often, because he's the best quarterback in the league and like one of the best quarterbacks we've ever seen. Although he's kind of off to a rough start this season, 6 touchdowns and 5 picks.
Not played well
No,
for him, I guess.
for anybody. I mean, 6 touchdowns, 5 picks is not great for
I
anybody,
mean,
but especially not
there
him.
are quarterbacks that would take that. So
You know who would take that? George Blanda.
yeah.
That's 5 interceptions is 1 game for George Blanda. He's like, that's nothing. Those are sissy numbers. Get out of my way. That's how they spoke back then. 1960s. In between puffs of he's like smoking a cigar. George Blanda's smoking a stogie in
Gonna
the
say you
huddle.
weren't hacking up enough of a lung for it to be like that.
Yeah, no, he's smoking a stogie in the huddle with the guys. There's like a big puff of smoke, and then they come out and they're like, "What's the play, George?" He's like, I don't know. Fuck it, I'm just gonna throw it. Anyway, my scold is Patrick Mahomes, and not for his play so far, but if you missed it, he threw an interception on Sunday against the Chargers and then ran over to try to make the tackle. And basically, like we've been teaching people how to tackle for a long time now. And Patrick Mahomes ignored every single thing that anybody's ever taught anyone about tackling somebody. Like they teach you head up, shoulders down, see what you're hitting, helmet on the ball,
Mm-hmm.
all these things. Patrick
Wrap up.
Mahomes, yeah, wrap up would be a good one for Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes runs in, turns completely backwards, and like sits down and does this like cannonball into traffic.
Do a barrel.
Oh yeah. Slippy was in his helmet. Slippy like took over the thing from Andy Reid. He's like, do a barrel roll, Star Fox. But so Patrick Mahomes does this like he just dives in ass first into the crowd. And the only thing that's going to happen if you do that is that someone's going to get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
This is why they teach you specifically not to do that. And like I feel like Patrick Mahomes is very fortunate that he is not the one that was hurt because doing what he did, like being serious for a second, you can break your neck, you can break your spine,
Mm-hmm.
you could get a concussion, it was extremely reckless and dangerous move for him to go in like that.
Yeah.
He completely misses anybody who has a blue jersey on and instead goes directly into the knee and quad of his best receiver, Rashee Rice, and completely blows out Rashee Rice's leg. And now Rashee Rice has a torn ACL. Likely. I don't think they've officially announced it yet. They're like, well, I don't know. We're going to do some tests. He might be
They're
okay.
pretty good at determining those before imaging.
My favorite thing was they're like, he might be okay. It might not be a torn ACL. And then you watch the slow-mo replay and his entire leg bends the opposite way that a knee is supposed to bend. And he's screaming. Patrick Mahomes is laying on the ground. Rashee Rice is screaming. And they're like, yeah, that might not be a torn ACL. He's questionable for next week. Rashee Rice is not
If
questionable for next
if
week.
it's not a torn ACL, that might be worse.
Yeah, so what I saw, torn ACL is the best case scenario. So yeah, like it's his number one option and a guy who's been like their only good, reliable guy so far this season on an offense that's already underperforming. And you just did a barrel roll straight into his knee and knocked him out for the rest of the season. Like if I was a Kansas City Chiefs fan, I wouldn't want Mahomes chasing down the interception. Like it's like whatever. And I know like he's a competitive guy and that it's all part of like the DNA of being a quarterback in the NFL. But I'm like, just dude, like, don't do that because worst case scenario, you are the one leaving on a stretcher.
Hmm.
And I feel like second worst case scenario, you blow out your best wide receiver's leg and he's done for at least a year. So
Yeah.
I just thought like stupid move overall by him and very unfortunate for Rashee Rice. Really couldn't have happened to a nicer guy than Rashee. I It's kind of ironic because if he was just suspended this year like he should have been, this wouldn't have happened. And
He'd be healthy.
I I think it's Taylor Swift who said it best. Karma's a bitch, Rashee. Karma is the knee of the wide receiver. Karma is the quarterback doing a barrel roll into your leg. Gonna get so much hate from the Taylor Swift fans. But who's your scold for week 4 before I get us canceled?
Everyone who told me that Aaron Rodgers playing for the Jets this year was just gonna fix them.
I just feel like every week you're just talking shit about me, and you're like, yeah, it was everybody who said this. I'm like, that's
In
just me.
fairness,
It's just me.
there's a lot of people who truly believe that. Uh, they're bad. Like they're a bad offense still with him. Like I get that that game was wet and sloppy and messy and all that. Then why did Aaron Rodgers throw the ball 42 times in those conditions?
Yeah,
Like if that's the excuse for why they couldn't beat, quite frankly, a not good Denver team, um, then why not lean on Brees Hall?
yeah.
It doesn't make it. I know that he didn't necessarily play very well in that game, but like
Well, hold on, because not very well is a very nice way to say he carried the
I
ball 10 times for 4 yards.
yeah, yeah, I'm well aware of that. And still, like you put up 9 points. So clearly throwing the ball in those conditions wasn't working either.
I got to learn this lesson for next year is that I'm when I do my picks for the 2025 NFL season and for fantasy football, I'm not taking anybody or any team that's tied to a bad quarterback. And I'm not taking anybody or any team that's tied to a bad coach because good Lord, Robert Saleh and Nathaniel Hackett are horrible coaches.
Yeah.
And one thing we didn't talk about on the pod last week is that this was supposed to be the Nathaniel Hackett revenge game
Hmm.
where they're like, we're going to take down Sean Payton after he talked all this shit about Nathaniel Hackett. And the only thing that happened on Sunday is that they proved Sean Payton right with every single thing Sean Payton said about Nathaniel Hackett.
Yeah.
Because it's just there was a bad game plan. You threw the ball 42 times. And I mean, like Brees Hall was not good, but Braylon Allen ran 8 times for 34. Like
Yeah.
he's a big physical back. Like give that dude the ball more.
Yeah. Like that's the thing is like I think they ran the ball like a combined what 20 21 times, something like that.
Yeah, Brees Hall
It
had
was
10, Allen had 8, and Rodgers ran 5 times.
okay. So
Which Rodgers
there were
running
some
was more effective than
yeah,
him throwing the other day.
yeah. So I mean it's just like yeah, like sure, I think we can certainly put plenty of this on Robert Saleh and Nathaniel Hackett. However, I'm not going to sit here and say that Aaron Rodgers doesn't have enough pull with that coaching staff to say, hey, these conditions are shit. Should probably be a ground and pound game.
The thing about Aaron Rodgers is like, yeah, you're right. Like it's not like you can't just blame the coaching
Yeah.
staff because he is the one that's calling the offense in
Yeah.
large part. And I really think that there was like a concerted effort to be like, yeah, we're gonna stick it to Sean Payton and
Hmm.
show him like how good our Nathaniel Hackett, Aaron Rodgers offense can be. And it was shitty. And Sean Payton's quarterback threw for 60 yards and they won,
Yeah.
which hasn't been done since the 1960s AFL. That's a little teaser for Beautiful Disaster in AFL story. And Sean Payton is the one that's laughing all the way to the bank. Beat him. But
Yeah.
just gonna
Yeah.
tell
I
you,
mean,
tell all of you guys right now, when the Jets beat the Vikings in London this weekend, like 13-9, I'm not gonna be surprised at all. Because it's a London game and it's stupid and it's just the whole thing's just stupid. Shouldn't send games overseas. Dumb game.
yeah. I mean, it's just it's so hard for me to watch this Jets team play and see them making their way to 10 wins. It's just I don't see this team stringing wins together because there's gonna be probably moments where they drop a couple in a row too. So
Yeah.
it's just
You probably needed this one,
mhm.
right? The San Francisco game, okay, I get it. San Francisco, pretty good team. You won the Titans game, you won the Pats game, and after beating the Pats is what everybody's like, this is the Jets team. Like, okay,
Mhm.
congratulations, you beat the shittiest team in the entire NFL. Trust me, as a fan of them, they are the shittiest. They have the lowest talent level of any team in the NFL. Uh, you probably needed this game because your next couple are Vikings, Bills, Steelers. You get to play the Patriots again, but then it's like Texans. Like it's not an easy schedule coming up.
Yeah.
You got to win your winnable games. So
I will say the Texans have not played well this year either. Um, so maybe that one is winnable. But yeah, I mean, to put themselves in a solid position, they kind of need to win two out of the next three.
hmm. Well, they're probably going to win one this weekend. It's going to be stupid, and we're all going to come in here and be like, "What do we make of this week?" And it doesn't really mean anything. Nothing means anything. Time is a flat circle. George Blanda is the greatest quarterback of all time, the ultimate grip it and rip it guy. All right, gambling picks for week 5. Last week we went a paltry 1-4. The only one that hit, I had Brandon Aubrey over 1.5 field goals on Thursday Night Football, and it just barely hit because I
Uh,
jinxed him. Like going into last week, I was like, this guy's 10 for 10. He doesn't miss. And he fucking missed. And he went 2 for 3. So it hit. Um, However, to instill some confidence in our listeners, I went back and did the math. If you started with $100 and put $20 on all 5 of our picks every week, you would be up $117.61. So if you've been betting with us since week 1, you will have more than doubled your money. It's like a 200 and something 217% return on your investment right now. So
yeah.
like we're up more than double for the year. So it was a bad week. Uh Made me a little gun shy to pick games this weekend because like to be honest, looking at the game lines, there's really not a lot that I love. But I found some props that I really like. I think you'll like some of mine too. But it is your week to go first with your pick for Thursday Night Football. And I'm going to put it in my handy dandy gambling picks tracker so that when we have another bad week in the future, I can be like, yeah, but we're up $200 for the year. And it's funny. I picked $100 because I feel like that's reasonable amount for people to be gambling. You like people are like, if you would have started with $1 million, you'd be at 2 million right now. But great, I definitely did not start with $1 million in my DraftKings account. But thank you. I feel like $100 is probably obtainable for our listeners who gamble. So that's where that came from. But what is your pick for Thursday Night Football? It is Bucs at Falcons. Falcons favored by 1.5.
I think I just kind of want to take the Bucks money line. I don't know. Like, I just don't. I don't trust the Falcons. I don't.
The Falcons. So the Falcons beat the Saints this past weekend.
Yeah.
I called this on the podcast last week. Anyway, the Falcons beat the Saints this past weekend in the dumbest win you will ever see. They got 4 field goals. They got a special teams touchdown on a muff punt and a
Yeah.
defensive touchdown on an interception by Derek Carr.
Yeah.
And they basically used that to win the game and did nothing on offense. Stupid game. Stupid home win. I'm going back to the well here. I picked Brandon Aubrey over 1.5 field goals last week, and it hit. We're going with another kicker, Atlanta kicker, Young Ho Koo, over 1.5 field goals. I went to look up Young Ho Koo's stats today while I was working. I was like, I'm just going to see what he's kicked this year. And I'm very afraid to Google Young Ho on my work computer. So I had to do it on my phone. Young Ho Koo is 9 of 9 so far this year. And I know by saying that I just jinxed him because I said the same thing. This is like same analysis as last week. Oh, Brandon Aubrey, it's 10 of 10. He doesn't miss. So Young Ho's 9 of 9. This past week, he just went 4 of 4 in that Saints game, like I just mentioned. He hit from 53, 44, 42, and 58, which was the game winner as time expired. And in both games against the Buccaneers last season, he attempted 3 field goals in each games. So he just needs to go 2 of 3, like Brandon Aubrey did, and we cashed that one. So I think this is my new thing, Matt, with how good kickers are this season, is I'm just going to bet on kickers to hit field goals, and that'll just be it for me. That's my whole, it's a legitimate strategy.
My whole thing these days.
That's pretty much it for me. So turn my DraftKings account into a kicker gambling place. That's it. That's our new podcast. It's 1960s AFL football and what kickers you should take the over for this weekend. Spoiler alert, it's all of them. What's your weekend pick?
So I'm gonna take Josh Allen over on the 233.5 passing. You know, they're playing in Houston, so we don't have elements to be an issue there. And it's a low enough mark that it feels as safe of a prop as I can really ever get with a superhuman athlete like Josh Allen.
Stephon Diggs revenge game. First game against his old team after being traded. It's a fun slate this weekend, like narratively and like also on field. Like Bucs Falcons is going to be stupid on Thursday and could be fun. Then you have the London game. You have Panthers Bears, which is like Caleb Williams versus the team that could have had Caleb Williams. And God, if Bryce Young was playing, that would be amazing. But it's Andy Dalton. Bills Texans, we just mentioned. Ravens Bengals, which is where I'm going for my prop. But like, yeah, some fun games. And then the afternoon sucks. So like, if you're going to do something with your family, do it between 4 and 7:30. Watch the early games. My prop, like I like your pick. I think it's a safe pick with Josh Allen. I think I have a safer pick with a superhuman athlete somehow. Matt, Derrick Henry's rushing line is 84.5 yards.
Yeah.
Against the Cincinnati Bengals this weekend,
who refused to stop the run.
The Bengals are 25th versus the run so far this season and 22nd in defensive DVOA. We spent pretty much the whole podcast talking about Derrick Henry and how awesome he's been. 199 and 151 in back-to-back weeks. I got to get 85 rushing yards out of Derrick Henry. That 85. Yeah. That's it. Come on. We're going back to the well. You know, I went to Derrick Henry week 1 with the Chiefs, and I was like, I love this. He was like 72 and a half. And I was like, when would you ever get Derrick Henry for 72 and a half? And it didn't hit. And then he wasn't great against the Raiders, and we were all sitting here like, what is going on? And Didn't really account for the fact that he's brand new to this offense and they're like
Yeah.
trying to figure it out and work him in. Well, he's worked in now.
Yep.
84 and a half. Too low. Too low. Speaking of Derrick Henry, long shot bet of the week. We're sticking with King Henry. Derrick Henry to run for 120 or more yards is plus 320. So remember, our goal for the long shots is plus 300 or higher.
Mm-hmm.
So 120 yards or more, plus 320. Derrick Henry to score 2 touchdowns is actually plus 285. So they're saying it's more likely he's going to score 2 touchdowns than it is that he's going to run for 120 yards against this poultry Bengals defense, who could not force Washington to punt one time.
Yeah.
They couldn't get one punt out of Washington on Monday Night Football. And then they come back and play Carolina and allow 24 points to Andy Dalton. Chuba Hubbard, 104 rushing yards. You telling me Chuba Hubbard is going to get 104, but Derrick Henry can't get 120? We're cashing this long shot bet. We're 2-2 in long shots. We're cashing this one with Derrick Henry. We're riding him this weekend.
Yeah.
So, but that is it for us. As always, Fouled Out can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, anywhere you get your podcast. You can hit us up on Gmail at Fouled Out Sports. You can find our videos on TikTok at Fouled Out Sports Podcast. It's a long name, but you can't miss it. Coming soon to the Fouled Out Network near you, a beautiful disaster, a 1962 AFL story. I seriously, like, someday when we don't have a pod to do and we're like, God, what are we going to do this week? When NFL and NBA and all this stuff's out of season, we're revisiting the 1960s AFL. And we're just going to do a podcast of like, here are the top 50 crazy stats I found from AFL football in the 1960s. Because Matt and I were just doing that during a quick break of the quick intermission of the podcast, and it was very entertaining. Not so great weekend for college football this weekend, but the next 2 weekends for college football are bangers. So do something nice with your family on Saturday because you won't see them the next 2. And then another fun slate of NFL football starting the night that this podcast comes out with Thursday Night Football, Bucs at Falcons. So everybody enjoy the football. Matt, my friend, we will be back next week to talk week 5 of the NFL. Surely a week that will not lead to more questions. A week full of answers, a week full of gambling victories and getting back on track in fantasy football and not getting a 0 from my tight end position. Maybe you'll win a game in fantasy football this year
yeah.
too.
Yeah, you can keep complaining while I lost to go to 0-4 by 0.16.
I can't even be mad. So I was up 25 going into Monday Night Football. And I was like, I just need Kenneth Walker not to score 25. And he didn't score 25 because he scored 32 and I lost by 7.
Yeah.
But my team only put up like 87 points in the first place. So I'm like, okay, I can't. My team didn't play good enough to win. And I would have been fortunate to win and didn't. So can't be mad about that. But I can be mad that Marshall's the last undefeated team in our fantasy football league. And he's spent every day since Sunday letting me know about it. So somebody's got to take that kid down. He cannot go undefeated and win our fantasy football championship. I'll never hear the end of it. But all right, buddy. I'll see you soon.
Yep.
Bye, guys.
Bye,
Bye,
Robin.